Good morning and welcome in. Um, this is week 2 for our SBIR Accelerator. As a quick order of events for today, we're going to do a very brief recap of what we talked about yesterday, just to remind you of what it was. We're also going to look at those one-sentence pitches. We will dive into the differences between all of the 11 different SBIR agencies. And then we're going to talk about scoping the project before we wrap up with activities for this week. So, our very quick recap. Last week we talked about the registrations that you'll need. We talked about SBIR and STTR, the differences between the two programs, what they're set up for, eligibility for those programs. And then at the very end, we talked about that one sentence pitch. And so I'll open it up to you. We've only got two people in the group today. But if either of you are interested in sharing that one sentence pitch, we can talk about it here and maybe get some feedback on that. So looks like Amy, you might be ready to go.
Yeah, sure. I didn't memorize it.
Okay.
Was that part of the assignment? I'm sure it will be
No.
at some point, but so let me just read it. My company, In-House CTS, is developing portable compost toilet systems to give porta potty users and those without plumbing a surprisingly pleasant experience without offensive odors, toxic chemicals, or soiling potable water. We compost every deposit on site, turning waste into resources, one movement at a time.
I like it. You might be crossing into the two sentences there, but
It was two sentences. I did
okay.
cheat. But if you use a semicolon,
Mhm. Oh yeah. And I think as far as an elevator pitch goes, that's really good.
okay. I'm open to feedback, or if you're going to give that later, that's fine too.
Um, I I don't know that I have any notes. That was clean.
Okay.
Olga, how about you?
Yeah, just a second. I had a hard time to choosing one.
Mhm.
So here is my version. My company, SunCatch Lab, is developing a therapeutic device, RFAC, to help poultry producers solve embryo mortality and inconsistent hatch rates with a biosupportive radio frequency technology that enhances supports, um, well, extra word, embryo development without chemicals or operator input. It's a little long, though.
I think that's also pretty clean. I mean, you hit all of the points that you need to. My question, and you may have hit it, but I didn't quite catch it, is who are you targeting? Who's your customer that you're interested in?
Poultry producers. And just for your reference, I sent it to chat as well.
Oh, awesome. Let me just read that real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that both of you did a great job on this. Last time I taught this, it looked like a lot of people ran it through AI and they had just huge complex sentences that, I mean, technically it's one sentence, but it was a lot of info they tried to cram in there. But I think both of you did a good job about making this concise and um, and getting all the relevant information in. Because it's not about telling everybody your whole business plan in one sentence, right? It's just about this is my business, this is what we do, this is who we try to help, this is how we help them. And I think both of you did a great job.
I think that you were really clear in, framing the assignment too, because I think in the past, assigning a pitch, felt a lot more complicated, but you gave a nice framework with the template and it just made it really easy.
Oh, awesome. Well, cool. Good job to both of you on that.
Thanks.
We will jump into the next section here. So I have, I think, 60 something slides and only an hour and a half to go through it. Um, I will try not to rush through all of this. A lot of the stuff that you're going to see is similar between the agencies. but I want to let you know that, of course, there are differences and hopefully highlight the differences as we go through. As we're doing this, if you have questions, please let me know. If we don't cover everything today, that's fine. We'll just move it to next week. It's not a problem. With that said, let's jump into it. I don't remember if I showed you this slide last week, but these are all of the agencies that participate in SBIR. So there are 11 total agencies. Now, if you count these up, you don't see all of that. I don't think. Hold on, we got 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so there are 12 different pieces because NIST and NOAA under the Department of Commerce act independently. So 11 total agencies, but Department of Commerce is split up. Now, the ones that you see that are gray participate in STTR as well. So if you remember the difference, SBIR, the majority of the work happens in-house with your business. And then STTR, there's a required piece where you're working with some research institution, could be university, could be research lab, could be national laboratory, something that's a nonprofit with a research focus. And that's your definition of a research institution. Now, each of these has a focus in something different. I'm not going to read all of this to you. I'll send you the slides, but I do want to just give some anecdotal information about each of these. NSF will fund just about anything, and I like to say that they'll fund anything that they think is cool. And so if you've got new cutting edge technology with a decent chance that it might not work, you've got the solid foundation that says that there's a good chance it should or that it would work. But if you are on the edge of what's possible, NSF is a good opportunity for you. Department of War, they have, I think, 14 different components. We'll see that on the next slide. And they have a variety of different needs. And so there's a good chance you'll find a topic under that that fits what you're working on. They also have what they call open topics. And so this is really pushed forward predominantly by Air Force and Space Force. But all of the different components are going to start integrating the concept of an open topic more as we move forward. That's one of the things with the new reauthorization, one of their goals. And an open topic is you get to pitch the problem and your solution. So instead of filling a need that they have already identified in their standard topics, you can show them a deficiency that they have and then give them your solution for it. NASA does a lot of stuff, not just flight and not just space flight. But if you've got anything that maintains life here on Earth, if you can make it relevant to space, they're interested. NIH, of course, is all things health. Department of Energy, all things energy. And in the past, they've had very specific topics, and they're trying to relax that this year and moving forward, they're trying to make it more applicable to more people. So if you have energy-based anything, that's a good opportunity for you, potentially. Department of Education, I'll let you know they did get defunded in the sense that the major organization is gone, but their SBIR program is supposed to continue. Uh, Last year, there was a lot of confusion across multiple different agencies, Department of Education being one of those. And so the idea is that it will be housed under a new department, but keep the Department of Education name and focus. So what that looks like, I'll tell you, I'm not entirely sure moving forward, but that should come back soon. Of course, we've got Department of Homeland Security, anything that's critical infrastructure on borders, perimeters, keeping U.S. citizens safe. Department of Transportation, anything that moves essentially. So if you've got transportation-based innovation, that could be an opportunity for you. EPA, I was under the impression that they likely would not be coming back, but I just saw them at the SBIR conference just a few months ago, and they said they're ready to move forward. They're ready to release some topics. So hopefully we'll see that come out soon. And that's, of course, anything with an environment or green focus. If you're interested in EPA, but maybe your project's a little bit bigger, you need a little more funding since EPA is relatively small. USDA and NOAA are also pretty good options for you. They have similar topics that overlap with EPA. USDA has two topics under their, I believe it's I believe they have 12 total, but two of their topics are focused on commercial off-the-shelf technology. So you don't need a brand new cutting edge technology. You can use something that already exists and find a new application for it that can help people in rural areas, typically farmers, but really it's just rural communities. And so if you can do that, they do have an opportunity for you there. And you can see that's here. They call it COTS, commercial off-the-shelf technology. And then NOAA, they say anything in the water column. So that's all the way from the lower levels of our atmosphere all the way to the bottom of the ocean. So if you've got tech that runs in any of that, NOAA might have an opportunity for you. And then finally, NIST. And NIST is a little they're a little bit different than the other agencies in that they have very abstract topics. And I believe that there's five, if I'm remembering correctly, there's five general topics that if you can find a way to fit your project under any of those five, they're willing to look at it and potentially work with you. But because NIST is all about standards and measurement, um, it's a little tricky to find a fit. Not that it's impossible. There are definitely companies out there working on it, but it's a little harder than some of these other agencies to find a good fit.
What is the COTS acronym again?
Commercial off the shelf.
Thank you.
Mhm. So here are again all of those agencies, and we see the different components that make those up. And so Department of War has their 14. If you see NIST, they've got 24 specifically under NIST, and then HHS has three extra on top of that. And so, 12 departments in DOE, eight under Department of Transportation, seven under Department of Homeland Security. And so, with all of these different components and all of these different agencies, there's a very good chance that you'll find something that works with your innovation. Some of the differences that you'll see between these agencies is the proposal submission process, the requirements. So it could be the format, the number of pages, the content expectations, any additional documents that they have as supplemental to the actual proposal. You'll see differences across those. Funding levels are going to vary, and we'll see that in just a little bit later. The period of performance is going to vary. Generally, it's around 6 to 8 months for a phase one, generally 2 years for a phase two, but of course, there is some flexibility. Solicitations per year. So some agencies have one solicitation, some agencies have three. And then Department of War is a little bit different in that they have new topics released every month. So essentially, you could think of that as 12 solicitations. Communication with the topic authors and program managers is going to vary. So we talked about the differences in grants and contracts last week. If you're working with a contracting agency, they usually have a pre-solicitation period. So that's when you can see the topic, but you can't apply. And you are allowed to have conversations privately and directly with the program manager or the topic author. As soon as it opens up and you have the ability to apply, depending on the agency, you will either not be able to communicate at all, or all communication will be made public. You don't see that in granting agencies. So granting agencies, generally speaking, you can have that conversation all the way up until the moment that you hit submit. You can ask your questions, you can talk to them about uh, potentially the scope, potentially the topic that you are writing about, to see if they're interested and what their thoughts are, those sorts of things. Registration requirements are going to vary, and we're going to look at that on the next couple of slides. And then the funding vehicles vary. We talked about grants and contracts. They do have cooperative agreements as a third option. It's not as common, but if grants are the most hands-off and contracts are the most hands-on, cooperative agreements are somewhere in the middle. So the agency will be in contact with you and they will want to do some work with you and have some oversight, but they're not going to be as strict as contracts. And of course, not as relaxed as grants. So when we're talking about registrations, you see across the top all of the different agencies. And then down this left side column, you see the different websites or the registrations that you'll need. So an EIN, everybody needs an EIN. This is your business entity, so LLC, corporation, whichever you have, registered with the IRS, you get an EIN. And so that is your tax number for your business. You'll need that moving forward to show that you have a real business. Your unique entity identifier you actually get when you apply to SAM.gov. So when you apply to SAM.gov, you'll get two things depending on the way that you apply. One is a UEI, everybody gets that. And then the second is a cage code. A cage code is going to be important if you are working with Department of War and I think a couple of the other agencies, but I know specifically Department of War needs that cage code. And then you have the small. Was there a question? Sorry.
Oh, I do have a question, but I was just clearing my throat. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh,
Um,
go for it.
it was about the UEI. I can
Mhm.
ask you later. Uh,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. We'll wrap up this slide and then let me hear it. So on SAM.gov, right, you apply, you get that UEI, and you'll need that as you apply to grants.gov if you need to go that route or any of these other um, registrations. And we'll see on the very next slide, there are several more registrations. Let's see if you're working with Department of War, you need DSIP with HHS, or I usually call that NIH. They have ERA Commons. They actually have another one as well that would help you out a little bit more. Department of Energy, they have PAMS. If you're looking at NSF, they've got research.gov. And then, of course, you can go down the line and see all of the different registrations that you need here. I don't think that I need to read off all of them. I will point out, though, that grants.gov is important for several, but not all. And so grants.gov is a good opportunity for you to see what grants exist. But even some of the agencies that offer grants don't necessarily need you to apply through grants.gov. Yes, what's your question about that UEI?
Oh, so when I applied for a TSA pre-check pass, I got a UEI. Is it going to be the same UEI? I think I had to go to some government agency to fill out stuff. Just wanted to know if it was the same number. Like, is it based on a social security number?
Well, this one will be specific to your business entity. I assume that you didn't get your TSA pre-check for the business entity. You got it for your personal.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I've got the TSA pre-check and it's a known traveler number is what I'm familiar with. I don't remember seeing a UEI on that document, but
Yeah, I got
they
both.
might have just changed the name.
No, I got both numbers, two numbers.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I just haven't noticed it. UEI previously, if you've looked at this in years past, was a DUNS number.
Okay, no, mine was called a UEI.
Okay. Um, I I mean, if they're just using unique entity identifier as a general term, that might be what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But this, of course, will be specific to your business.
Okay.
We talked about differences in funding amount, and so you can see all of our agencies here on the left. And in a phase one and phase two, this is the maximum funding amount for each of the different agencies. You can also see in a phase one and phase two the differences in the period of performance. Usually we're looking at 6 months. We'll put that as an average in a phase one, but it could be as low as 3 months. And actually, NASA has the Ignite program where they try to get you out as quickly as possible. And so you might see that as low as 3 months also. In a phase two, that typically goes up to 2 years. And then we have total program funding over here. Now, these numbers have likely changed since I made this slide, and I haven't gone back to see that. I do keep up with the maximum funding amounts and the period of performance, but this one I'm not sure is as relevant in this presentation. And so if you see these and you see that they are potentially out of date, if you do some digging, that would be why. But the rest of this, I promise I keep up to date.
John, I have a question about this USDA. Is that the second number 175 for STTR? What's the difference?
Oh, great question. Thank you
Please.
for bringing that up. So USDA has two different funding amounts, and it's not for SBIR versus STTR. It's actually for that commercial off-the-shelf technology. So you remember I brought that up as one of the things that USDA has, and several other agencies will allow it, but USDA has two specific topics for commercial off-the-shelf technology, and you see that they have a lower funding amount for that because it's technology that already exists and you're repurposing it. And so it's a lower funding amount for that, as opposed to a brand new technology, they'll offer a higher funding amount. Good question. Thank you. So, when you are choosing the best fit for your innovation, there are some things to think about and some tools that you can use. You'll want to identify which agencies align with your technology and your innovation, and there might be multiple. So, as I've mentioned, NSF will fund nearly anything, and Department of War has so many topics out that you can find a specific topic under Department of War that you can apply to, but then also NSF might be a good option for you, right? And I bring up Department of War a lot just because of how many topics they put out. I'm not trying to push anybody into that, but they do have a lot. So that is a very strong option for many people. Um, if there are multiple, you want to start thinking about when those solicitation cycles are and which of those is going to be the best fit for you. Because if those solicitation cycles overlap, you might only have time to get one solicitation put in. If they don't overlap, then there's a good chance that you can put in multiple different applications per year. The problem that you might run into, and this is just something to keep in mind, is you cannot accept money for the same scope of work from multiple agencies. So if you submit a scope of work to, let's just say USDA, and then you take that same scope of work and also submit it to EPA, and both of the agencies accept you, you're only allowed to accept one. So keep that in mind. As you're looking for the best agency to fit your innovation, one thing you can do is go to sbir.gov, and then they have an awards page. And when you go into that website, you can see all the awards that have been funded previously. And I think that this program's been running for close to 40 years. And so you can see all of those awards that have been funded, and you can search through keywords, you can search through states, you can search through years, you can search through, there are several different functions that you can filter by. But one of the great opportunities is you can use keywords that are similar to what you're working on. Find which agencies have funded it in the past or similar technology in the past, and there's a good chance that they're still interested. In addition, you can see which business it was that was awarded the funds for that similar technology. And you can reach out to them directly and potentially work on collaborating with them or seeing if they would be interested in licensing your technology, things like that. And so it could be a fantastic opportunity for you to one, find partners, but also find which agencies to target as you are sorting through these different solicitations. If you're working on trying to partner with a research institution, STTR, of course, could be a strong option for you instead of an SBIR based on the needs and how much of your work needs to be outsourced. And one thing to consider when you're looking at that is, do you have a strong research team that you are working with in your business? Or is that something that you might want to outsource? Do you have the facilities and the equipment to do the work that you need to progress your innovation? If not, there's a good chance that one of the research institutions might have the facilities and equipment that you can use. So think about that as you are trying to look at the difference between SBIR and STTR. Any questions before we jump into this next part? No? Okay. So now we're going to look at all of the different agencies in detail. And this is where, again, you'll see there are some similarities between them, but hopefully I can highlight the differences for you. Um, I'll try not to just read everything on the slides. You do have access to these, and you can go back and um, look in case there's anything that I skipped over here for you. But we'll start out with NSF. So the National Science Foundation has both SBIR and STTR. They are a granting agency. You do need to register for research.gov on top of SBIR.gov and SAM.gov. Um, Last we saw, now they have not come out with a new solicitation after the reauthorization yet, and there's a good chance it may not be for 1 or 2 more months. But last we know, their funding for phase one could go up to 305,000 for a period of 6 to 12 months. Phase two is up to $1 million for about 2 years. And they do have follow-on funding. So it's phase 2B, could go up to 500,000. And I believe that they require some matching funding depending on the route that you take with that next step. And so if you're interested, you've got their website here. They do have 3 submission windows. Keep in mind that they have not released their new solicitation yet, so we might see these dates change. But when you apply, you start out with a project pitch, and that project pitch has 4 parts, and we can see those here. There's the technology innovation, the technical objectives, the market opportunity, the company and team, with character counts on how big each of those sections are. When you type this up, it comes out to about 4 pages, which is much smaller than a full application and much easier to write. And so we tend to advise companies to start by looking at NSF and putting in this project pitch to see what feedback you get on the pitch. If they reject the pitch and say that you are not a good fit, they will tell you why. And so you can use that feedback to support your proposal if you wanted to apply again to NSF, or if you wanted to take that information, build up your application, and apply to other agencies. Many of the criteria they're using to judge your application will be the same across the different agencies. So, uh, again, we do recommend a lot of people start here just to see if they get in. And if not, use the feedback as constructive feedback and not as them telling you that you're not good enough. After you submit the product pitch, it may take a little bit of time to hear back, but when you do hear back, you have, I believe it's 2 solicitation cycles to get in a full proposal. And so it's approximately 6 months to get in a full proposal after you hear back on that project pitch. And these are the different components of that full proposal. And you'll see many of these components are going to be replicated across different agencies. I'm going to try not to read those out as we go through. The topic areas under NSF are very broad. And so you've got just a pile of different topics that they're interested in funding. And then they also have other topics. So if you have a technology that maybe doesn't fit well under these different categories, you can always submit it anyway, and then they'll just sort you into other topics if they don't find a good fit for you. Just because there's a topic up here that maybe you aren't a great fit for, that doesn't mean they won't take you. Like I said, they'll fund just about anything that they think is cool. Oh, and as we're going through, one more thing that I'll mention is we do have a business that was successful in each of these different departments or the different agencies. You'll see those logos down here. Well, they'll be somewhere on the screen. And you're welcome to go through and look them up and see what they do and see which categories they fit under and all of that. For the
Then I
Department
have
of
a question. Yeah, so can we go back to NSF? So at your the last webinar with NSF, Ella, right? So she
Correct.
said that they do not fund the clinical trials, but when I asked her about the chicks thing, right? So she said they would fund some sort of trials, and I missed that the name of the trials. Do you recall how it's called?
Yes. So if you're working with animals, you are allowed to work with animals. And even if you are working with humans, there's a degree of flexibility that you can do. Now, they don't do clinical trials, right? So, and they're not doing Schedule 1 controlled substances, so they're not really doing drug discovery. But if you need to work with animals, it goes through a different process. So you have what's called an IACUC. That's Animal Care and Use Committee. And
Say it
so
again. I what?
It may be easier just to write out what it's called. So, Animal
Mhm.
Care and Use Committee. And frequently you'll hear people call it IACUC.
Okay, thank you so much.
Or I think that the I comes at the beginning with institutions or institutional. So Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee is the IACUC, is what that stands for. IACUC. And so it sounds like, based on your one sentence, that you would be working with animals and not people. Is that correct? Right. And so I don't think that there would really be any problem with that. NSF could fund it. I would think that you'd probably be a stronger fit for USDA. But, like I said, if you submit a project pitch, there's a chance that you get in, right? There's a chance that they like it and that you can move forward. Alternatively, if they say, no, maybe you're not a good fit, they'll tell you why, and then you can use that to bolster an application to USDA.
And one more short question. So if we submit several applications for the same tag to different agencies, do we mention those applications that was not funded yet or awarded yet? Do we mention them at the current and pending support form?
Yes, that would be pending support.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have several, where you're writing this out to many different agencies for the same project, even if the different scope of work, that might show up as a red flag as the reviewers are looking at it. So I would recommend not putting out more than maybe two per year. That's not a hard and fast rule, but just be cautious. Department of War. So they do have both SBIR and STTR. They work contracts, not grants, meaning that they are much more, I'll say demanding with the deliverables and the milestones, but they're just strict. They hold you to what you say you're going to do. They fund up to $250,000 for a phase one. It could be anywhere between 3 and 12 months of a period of performance. And then their phase two is about $1.2 million for that 2 year period. They also have follow-on funding. It could be sequential phase two enhancement or extensions. They also have an opportunity for a direct to phase two, and that says D2P2 is direct to phase two, where if you are farther along in your process or in your innovation, higher TRLs, think closer to like 6 or 7. Maybe not quite that far. But if you're farther along, there's an opportunity to skip over the feasibility testing and just go directly to prototype creation. And so that's direct to phase two. We have that website here, defensesbirsttr.mil. And so this will take you, I believe, to the DSIP portal. And through DSIP, you can see all of the different topics that are currently active. There's funding across, I believe it's up to 14 now. I think they added one. But it's either 13 or 14 different components. They say that they have 3 submission windows, but realistically it happens about every month. So um, you, and that's a new thing that they started last year, is that new topics released on the first Wednesday of every month, and then they're open for a month or a month and a half after they're released. If you are interested in contacting them and talking to them about those topics, you only have that pre-release period. So that's before it's open and you're allowed to submit. And during that pre-release period, you're allowed to have those private conversations. After that, any conversation is made public on the DSIP portal, that Defense SBIR portal. They do have specific contracts or specific topics. They're starting to call those traditional topics. And then they also have open topics, or those opportunities where you can tell them what the problem is that you see and how you plan to fix that. They do have several different components, so we'll see some on the slide and some on the next slide. And then the funding for a phase one and phase two will vary across the different components that make up Department of War. So we'll see some of those on the previous slide. We've got some more of them here. I won't read them all out to you. And then you see all of the different components here. They're just some of the areas that they are interested in, and I did my best to go through and update all of this. When you see the Department of Defense up there, it just know it's Department of War. I apologize about that. But a couple of things, and I won't read all these out to you, but air platforms, biomedical, nuclear, if you're working on sensors or weapons, electronics, human systems, they really have a very broad range of topic areas. And then, of course, those are broken down into very specific topics that are presented to you. NASA is a contract agency. They have both SBIR and STTR. If you are interested in working with NASA, you do also have to sign up for ProSAMs. Their phase one, they increased it this year, so it now is up to $225,000 for that phase one period. And then in a phase two, that's I'm going to round it when I say this $1.3 million for phase two, and that's over the 2 year period. They do have other funding opportunities. Usually, this, of course, would come after your phase two, but that's a phase 2E, phase two sequential, and then the CCRPP, which I will be honest, I forgot what that stands for at the moment. But they just know that they do have some other funding opportunities for you. They do have multiple focus areas, and we'll take a look at that on it's the 2 slides from now. They do have 2 submission windows for SBIR, and then they also have what they call the SBIR Ignite, which is it's still SBIR, but there's a very heavy commercialization focus. And they try to move you as quickly as possible from whatever technology you're working on to get it into the market, to get it into the hands of consumers very, very quickly. And so that's a little bit different process, but it is still SBIR. So if you're interested in contacting them, you can contact them early, but as soon as it becomes an open topic or open for you to submit, excuse me, it's a blackout period. So they will not talk to you as soon as you have the ability to start submitting applications. Here are the proposal requirements. Again, I'm not going to read through these just because you'll see that they are very similar across all of these agencies. I will point out one big difference is that they have a briefing chart. And so the briefing chart is a very condensed version of the information that you have in the rest of your proposal. And make sure you don't put any proprietary information in that. They do make the briefing charts public. Here are some of the areas that they are interested in funding. Now, I pulled that from this new solicitation that just came out, but aeronautics research, space transportation, space precision components, human surface mobility, lightweight structures, um, they're really all over the place. And these are specific to just the SBIR, not the Ignite program. And so the Ignite program hasn't come out yet for this year. I'm not sure if they'll be able to make it out quite, well, I'm not sure if they'll be able to make it out this year due to some time constraints on that. But if you go that route, things will be a little bit different in what they are interested in. Health and Human Services, typically we call this NIH, just because NIH is the component of Health and Human Services that really operates the SBIR program. They do have SBIR and STTR. They are the only agency that does both grants and contracts. You will need to sign up for ERA Commons in addition to the other registrations. They have one of the highest funding opportunities at 306,000 with a 6 month period of performance for SBIR and 1 year for STTR. They are also the only agency that has some wiggle room in this funding ceiling. And so it's 306,000, but depending on the work that you're doing and the funding availability, there's a chance they could give you more. So if you're working on anything health related, this is, of course, a great opportunity for you. They do have a fast track opportunity, so you can do phase one and phase two applications at the same time. They also have a direct phase two opportunity. Now, there are only three agencies that have direct to phase two. That's Department of War, NIH, and Department of Education. So you'll see it in those three. They also have a commercialization readiness pilot, so that's there to help you out and help to push you into that commercial space. They do have three submission deadlines, so that's three opportunities throughout the year. Now, we don't know what those are going to look like. These are the old numbers up here for the old dates and when they would typically accept your submissions, but of course they haven't released with this new reauthorization. It'll likely come back to something like this, but just keep in mind that this is not uh, set in stone. If you need to reach out to them, you have the information there. As I mentioned, they do have many different components, and so NIH by itself has 24 components that all flow into HHS. And then there's also the CDC, you've got the FDA, and the Administration of Community Living. All of them participate under the umbrella of HHS for SBIR. In Department of Energy, they do have SBIR and STTR. They offer grants. In the past, their topics have been very specific, but they are trying to broaden that and make it more applicable to more people this year. I will tell you that they are trying to redo their entire SBIR process. And so I would assume that many of the points that I have on this slide will remain the same, but there's a good chance that we will see some differences. Typically, they fund up to 250,000 for 12 months in that phase one, up to 2 million in a phase two for 2 years, and they do have follow-on funding. You can get a phase 2A or phase 2B, depending on the direction you're going, and then there's also a phase 2C that can come after. You can see their website here. They have several different DOE program offices. I think we saw that there are 12 of them, if I'm remembering right. And they do generally have two solicitations per year. Um, Again, exactly what that's going to look like with the way that they're changing everything, I'm not sure, but this is usually what we would expect. They are a grant agency, so you are able to reach out to them and contact them and talk to those topic authors. And you can see that here. Here's what you see in their proposal package. They do have a strong emphasis on that commercialization plan. And then the rest of this is about the same, it's about the same when you look at all the other agencies. Here are some of the things that they are interested in funding. Now, when they do the two different solicitations per year, one is more applied and the other one is more of a theoretical type of topics that you see in those solicitations. And so depending on what it is that you're working on, you might prefer one solicitation over the other. And here's some more things that they would be interested in. Under Department of Education, and I did mention previously that this will be housed under a new department, but it should still be Department of Education, SBIR. They have SBIR, not STTR, and they do offer contracts. They don't have any additional registrations, which means that you would go through grants.gov or sam.gov. And their SBIR phase one is about $250,000 for a period of 8 months. That phase two is $1 million for 2 years. And they do have a direct to phase two opportunity. So this is that third agency with that opportunity. You can find their website here. They do have one submission window per year. Usually it's that December to February period. Of course, that is very likely to change. And then if you need to contact them, you can reach out to them here. You can also see in their solicitation who to reach out to. Usually contact information is in there as well. The proposal is going to have these different components. One thing to note that if you're interested in working with Department of Education, you do need a letter of agreement to participate in the phase one research or research and development. So this is a letter of agreement to participate from either a school or a school district that is interested in your innovation. And so you'll need that letter in your application to show that there is interest in your technology. And then here are some things that they are interested in funding. We've got Department of Homeland Security. They have SBIR, not STTR, so they're not quite big enough for that. They offer contracts, not grants. They do have an additional registration. Their phase ones you see is 175,000 for about 5 months of work. Phase two is 1.5 million for 2 years of work. And they do have some other funding opportunities here. And there's our website. There's one submission window per year. And with technical questions, you must submit those about 2 weeks before the application close dates. And so you can submit those here. Full proposal will include these components. Again, if you're looking at these, you'll see that there is quite a bit of overlap between the different agencies and what they're interested in. And then the topic areas. So generally speaking, you've got these broad areas: terrorism prevention and enhanced security. You've got border management and security, enforcement and administrating immigration laws, safeguarding and securing cyberspace, and disaster resilience. Department of Transportation is also a contract agency. They have SBIR, but not STTR. They have an additional registration. They do have a Department of Transportation SBIR electronic submission portal that's different from the others. In SBIR phase one, we'll look at about $200,000 for 6 months. Phase two is 1.5 million for 2 years. And they do have a phase 2B if you need more funding after your first phase two. Excuse me. And they have one submission window per year. And when I talked to them at this most recent conference, they were very proud that their funding levels have not changed, even with all of the budget cuts that were happening earlier last year. And so they will be coming out, should be all about the same as what we've seen in previous years. So these numbers really shouldn't change much. If you need to contact them, you do have that information here. Full proposal will include these sections, and they do have a project pitch. So if they like your proposal, and this is backwards from some of the other agencies, when we looked at NSF, you had the pitch first. Here you have the pitch second. So you submit the full proposal. If they like it, you are then brought in to present a 15-minute pitch with 15 slides maximum to government officials, and there will be a Q&A involved in that as well before they make their decision on funding or not. And then here, some of the things that, or some of the administrations that work under Department of Transportation. So you see aviation, highway, motor carrier safety, you see railroads, you see just Federal Transit Administration as a whole. Anything that involves movement, you see that under Department of Transportation. EPA, and we are getting close to the end here. The EPA has SBIR, but not STTR. They offer contracts. They will make you sign up through Fed Connect, which is another registration you'll need. Phase one is up to 100,000 with 6 months period of performance, and 400,000 for a phase two with that 2 year period of performance. They do have some other funding opportunities. They've got one submission window per year. And then if you need to contact them, they are a relatively small agency. So I don't have a website here for you, but when they release their solicitation, the contact information is in that solicitation. These are the components of a full proposal and some areas that they're interested in. Safer chemicals, risk assessment, clean and safe water, air quality and climate. They also have a homeland security piece in there, and then sustainable materials and circular economy. Those are all pieces that EPA would be interested in funding if you fit under any of those. USDA has SBIR, and about 3 years ago, they finally were big enough to also include the STTR. So they've got both. They do offer grants, and you'll apply through grants.gov. So there's no real additional registration there outside of some of your standard. Phase one, um, we talked about the funding opportunities. They do have the two different funding amounts, depending on if you're using commercial off-the-shelf technology or if this is a new innovation. So that's why you see those two numbers. They have 8 months period of performance for an SBIR, 12 months for STTR, and then in a phase two, that's up to $650,000 for a 2 year period of performance. And we see here that they don't have additional phases, so they don't have follow-on phase two funding. Now, that doesn't stop you from either going back and starting over with USDA or potentially looking at phase two opportunities in other agencies. They typically have one submission window, so it's only one solicitation per year, and you can find the info to contact the topic authors in that solicitation. Now, they call it a NOFO or Notice of Funding Opportunity. I will say that USDA last year was struggling to get out a solicitation, and so with all of the um, challenges that we've had at the end of last year and then early this year, I'm curious to see if USDA will be able to get both phase one and phase two solicitations out. We'll see. Full proposal will include all of these pieces. And then here are some of the topic areas. And so let me see, we've got small and mid-size farms and it might be rural and community development, but there are the two that have commercial off-the-shelf technology as an option for you. I believe are those two, rural community development and small and mid-sized farms. Um, don't quote me on that. I should mark it on here. I have not. NOAA has SBIR, but not STTR. They offer grants, so you'll sign up on grants.gov for that. Phase one is up to 175,000 for 6 months period of performance. Phase two is up to 650,000 for 2 years period of performance. They have one submission window per year. And then in their solicitation is where you'll see the information if you would like to contact them. You should have a letter of intent, and you see that here. And that would be submitted before the full proposal. And you see the components of the full proposal here. Some of the areas that they are interested in funding: extreme events and cascading hazards, water availability, quality and risk, resilient coastal communities and economies, um, weather-ready nation, and I won't read all of those out to you, but just a couple of things that they would be interested in. Again, anything from lower atmosphere all the way to the bottom of the seabed. They're interested in technologies across all of that. NIST has SBIR, but not STTR. They have grants, so you can apply to that through grants.gov, up to 100,000. So they're a little bit smaller of an agency. For a 6 month period of performance on that phase one. Phase two is up to 400,000 for 2 years. And then they have one solicitation period per year, typically opening in January and closing in April. And then, of course, that information to contact them is in their solicitation. Full proposal will include these components. And then the topic areas. These are those topic areas, and they are fairly broad. So if you fit under them, or you can find a way to let them know how you fit under any of these topic areas, they are interested in working with you. And that's a relatively new development, that they are relaxing the rules. Previously, you would have to find the contact person in NIST that's already working on similar technology and convince them to work with you, you don't have to do that anymore. If you fit under any of these categories, they're interested in working with you. Okay, there's a lot of information. Do we have any questions about the different agencies?
I have question. So Department of War,
Okay.
I found it more complicated to be compliant to apply for SBIR with the DoD. Is there any help available to go through the compliance project, process for DoD particularly, and kind of get ready to apply with them?
Yes, yes. And I have the contact information at the end here, and I'll put it in the follow-up email too. But Apex Accelerators is probably your best bet. And
Okay. Mhm.
the Department of War actually is potentially even more complicated because they just released new cybersecurity standards. And I'm not sure if
Okay.
you've seen that yet, right? So those cybersecurity standards will make it harder to be compliant, and it will take more time and more money out of the small business pocket to be compliant. But once you're in with Department of War, they will do everything in their power to help you along the way. And so it's hard to get in, but once you're in, it's very worthwhile. Um,
Is that compliance only for the main applicant or for subaward as well?
that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Okay. Another question. So grant versus contract. Uh, I heard somewhere that with a grant, I know for sure that with a grant, they pay you, you do the project and you report. So that's like pay, project, report. But for the contract, I heard from someone that you have to do the part of the job, report, like partial, right? Report, and then they will cover those expenses you already had, right? Like they
Mm.
pay after you do a portion of your job. Is that right? Or they still pay upfront?
That's right. So the money is tied to specific milestones, and so they won't release funds until you show that you've done work.
Okay, awesome. And one more question. For BioSketch, the last time we applied with UAE, there was like one uniform form for BioSketch posted on the research.gov, I believe, so the NSF site. And you go through that research.gov registration, you fill out that form, you send it to GOE as well. Is that gonna change somehow? Because it's really, really not the easy process for me. Do you know anything
Um,
about it?
I have not heard about that specifically, but because Department of Energy is redoing their entire SBIR process and the website and the application system, that I would not be surprised if we see a change.
Thank you.
Hmm. All right. So let's talk
Um,
about,
I did
oh,
have one question,
yeah,
and it's just mainly curiosity. If somebody is working with animals, do they need like is there any like PETA um standards that kind of are they like included or is it separate or
great question. And I can actually answer this as someone who has worked with animals. So I mentioned previously that you go through an IACUC. So that's Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, meaning that you have to write out a full report about everything involving the animals, where they're living, what living conditions they're going to be in, how often you're feeding them, the, temperature and like ambient conditions that they're in, who's handling them, what trainings that person has had, what kind of things that you're doing during your testing, what's the end point. So if in some cases you have to give the animal some sort of disease before you test your treatment, what's the end point? So at what point? Is it a time frame? Is it a health condition? When do you call it quits and euthanize the animal? And so all of these things have to be considered and written out in a huge report when you apply. And then that goes to the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, that they have a bunch of people that are researchers, they have people from the community, they have a veterinarian, they have just a bunch of people around a table and they discuss your plan and they'll either pass or fail your plan. And so the care of the animals is very important to these projects and living conditions and standards and all of that. So I mean PETA is not involved, but there's a very complex process to be able to work with animals.
Okay.
John, how is that the plan called? Is it like animal care plan or what did you say?
The Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, and I'm
Yeah, but
not
that's like
sure.
your document you submit to NSF. How is that called?
I'm not sure the name for NSF.
Okay.
I haven't seen anyone work with animals through NSF yet, but you can. Let's talk about the scope. So the scope is the way that mm, it's really the way that everything in your application sort of talks to each other, right? So you have to be able to marry the budget, the structure, the team, the tasks, and all of it has to fit within the specifications that you've been given. So your period of performance and your budget ceiling have to be taken into consideration. The realistic capability that you have has to be taken into consideration. And so scope is, in short, the amount of work that you're doing within the period of performance and with the given budget. So this tends to become a problem when people overwrite or they underbid. And here we're talking about if you say that you're going to be able to do more than you realistically can do, that's overriding. Or if you underbid, you're requesting less money than you actually need. So if you have an award ceiling of 100,000 and you only request 80,000, then you might be underbidding. Now, that being said, you don't get extra points on your application for requesting less money. So always try and request the maximum, whatever the award ceiling is. And the reason why you would want to do that is, of course, to give yourself as much wiggle room as possible. You do have to be realistic about it. Of course, you do have to show a budget and a budget narrative. So anything that you're requesting funding for, you have to explain why that's important and relevant to your work. But you'll, of course, in your scope, need to account for the salaries of the people that are doing the work, the any um, equipment or facilities that you'd be renting. Please don't purchase any equipment, and you cannot use SBIR funding to purchase facilities, but you can rent out space or materials, supplies, things like that. So, of course, you'll have to account for all of this, and this all goes into scope. Scope creep does become an issue as you write out your work plan. And then as you think about it, you go, oh, well, maybe we can tack on another piece. Maybe we can do one more test. Maybe we can just add on all these little things. And then suddenly your project is bigger than you can reasonably do. And you didn't realize that you added that much. So that's considered scope creep. You want to try and avoid that as much as possible. You never want to overpromise and underdeliver on SBIR and STTR projects. If you're working on a granting or you're working with a granting agency, they're requiring best effort. So if things don't happen the way that you expect them to, that's okay. If you do happen to overpromise a little bit, it may not be that big of a problem. But if you do that with a contract agency, it does become a problem that you then might be less likely to get future contracts from that agency if you're not able to deliver. When you're looking at your scope, try to make sure that everything fits the SMART framework. And there's a very good chance that you've all heard this in some capacity before. But SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So when you are thinking about the work to be done, you have to consider the team that you're working with, make sure that they have these SMART goals in their tasks that you're laying out for them. And this will also help you as you are evaluating who's doing what, when, and potentially where if you're in different locations so that you don't have anybody that's over allocated anywhere. And you want to make sure that you're tying the scope to your objectives. So big picture objectives, break that down into tasks. And so you want to make sure that all of the tasks that you're having people do directly relate to one of the objectives that you're trying to get to. And then all of that directly points up to the overall goal of the work. So we do have an example here of technical objectives. Um, Run simulation models to ascertain the required power input to achieve 1.21 gigawatts during fusion reaction. That could be one of your objectives. And then another one is perform material testing on antiballistic collision plating that would not increase the overall weight or aerodynamic profile of a 1982 Pontiac Firebird. I'm not sure why you would be doing either one of these, but they are examples of the way that you could write your technical objective. Those objectives should be focused on the ultimate goal of ascertaining the feasibility of the proposed product or solution. So keep in mind that phase one is all about feasibility testing. Now, in an effort to keep you from over allocating yourself or potentially over promising and under delivering, you really want to keep the number of focused technical objectives to really about two or three. Typically, or previously, excuse me, we would say about 3 to 4 is where you would want to keep it. And then after working with one of the reviewers from Department of Energy, he said that 2 or 3 is really about the maximum. If you are a small business applying to SBIR and you've only got 6 months to do your work, and you try to say that you're going to get 4 or 5 or 6 potential objectives, there's a very good chance that they're going to take points off because it's not realistic that you would have the funding or the time to be able to get it all done. So 2 or 3 is about the sweet spot. When you're structuring your technical objectives, think about the the tasks that are going to go underneath that. So your objectives are going to be bigger concepts that you're breaking down using tasks into the actual specific actions that are being done. Yep, so those tasks are going to be the actions that you are performing underneath those objectives. The work plan and the budget are going to be based on the technical objectives. And it might take a couple of iterations going back and forth as you think about how much it's going to cost to do each of the different things. Maybe you've got early estimates and you get quotes later. How long is it going to take to do all these things? And then how are you going to verify the results of the experiment? Are you running it in triplicate? Are you like, what is your threshold for success? You need to consider that and have that written out so that you know what is passing or failing for your tests. Now, this is a great point to bring in subcontract for the research institution if you need one. So if you need extra expertise in a specific field, if you need testing facilities or equipment or anything that you don't have in-house that you can't pay for out of pocket or through this funding opportunity, there's an opportunity for you to go to a research institution to get some extra help or to subcontract out some of this work to somebody else. So the ultimate goal of a phase one should be addressing technical challenges or problems with the innovation. You need to come into your phase one recognizing that there are problems. If there weren't any problems, there wouldn't be any real need for this type of funding. And so be transparent about what the problems are and explain how you plan to overcome those obstacles. So it should be a clear path forward at the end of your phase one. So in your explanation of the work that's being done, all of it should guide you toward starting to build that prototype. And that would generally be what you consider the next step after that phase one. You can be expected to continue development activities in the interim. So you also, it's important to note that you can jump between different agencies. So if you start out with NSF and a phase one, and then afterward you realize that USDA is really a better fit for your next step, you're welcome to jump from NSF to USDA. That's not a problem, or really to any of these other agencies. The only caveat is you cannot jump from any of these agencies phase one into an NSF phase two. So if you want to work NSF phase two, you have to start out NSF phase one. They're the only agency that's picky about that. You're also welcome to move between SBIR and STTR. So if you need a bunch of help from a research institution in a phase one, you're welcome to start out with an STTR. And then potentially after that, you've got all the feasibility down, you've got the math, you've got whatever it is you need, and it's simply working on the prototype and doing prototype testing. Maybe you can do that in-house and you switch to an SBIR. That's perfectly fine, or vice versa. So you're certainly welcome to do that and use this to your advantage. As you are thinking about those next steps for many of these agencies, you'll need to talk about the direction of what you want to do in your phase two as you're writing your phase one. Now, you don't need a full phase two plan, but just hint throughout your phase one that you do have expectations of a phase two and what it is that you plan to do. That lets them know that you do have, an expectation of growth. You do expect success through this phase one, and you do expect to move forward. So you'll need to explain just a little bit about what the next steps are, how you're going to continue down that path, and then, how do you need to grow that team or business? Some of this will come up in your commercialization plan. Remember that the commercial potential is very important in SBIR and STTR, and so you do need to have some concept of the commercial potential, commercial success, pathway into market. How are you going to take market share? How are you going to create value both for yourself and your clients? All of those types of concepts. I think that we mentioned those a little bit last week. That's the information for today. Do we have any questions?
John, how long are these slide presentations available to us?
I'm going to put these, create PDFs of them and put them into the Google folder. You're welcome to copy them out of the Google folder and keep them for your own as long as you want. I don't have any plans to delete those Google folders afterwards, so they should be there for you, unless I just, for whatever reason, start running out of space.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question regarding STTR. So we had previously bad experience reaching over to NREL and trying to work together for one of the SBIR projects because the money NREL requested to be part of the project was over the budget of the entire SBIR
Right.
project anyway. So how to engage, well, first of all, how to engage institution to work with a small business, and also how to balance that the financing, let's say, because they cost a lot. I mean, NREL or even like universities, they cost a lot.
They do, and sadly, a lot of that is just administrative overhead. And so as the money trickles down, everybody that touches it has to take a piece. I will say that universities are probably more likely to work with you on that than, national laboratories or things like that. But I mean, there are some instances where you just can't make a deal, and that's sort of a sad truth. One thing, and I think that they will probably start to recognize it moving forward, is that there isn't a whole lot of money, and that they can't just suck it all up, that these are smaller grants or smaller funding opportunities. And so I would think that they would start to relax some of that, but I I mean most of them have what they consider a set percent that has to go toward administrative overhead and the indirect costs that they're going to require that, I mean, they're going to ask for no matter what. And so it's not a very good answer, and I'm sorry about that. But that's sort of just how it is in some cases.
I mean, if you know somebody who went through STTR and can share their experience in engaging institutions, that would be helpful just for future reference.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we do have one of our clients who's done several projects with, I think, Sandia, and they've used SBIR to help pay for it. But I believe they started with NMSBA. So they started with a small state-funded program that's through the National Laboratory to make those contacts first. And so after they've created the contacts with the researchers through the state-funded program on a small project, then they could come in afterwards and say, well, we would like to continue working with this researcher, but this is the maximum amount of money that we have. How much can we get done? And so I think that that was one of the opportunities that they used and just slowly built up the relationship with the labs before coming in with SBIR.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so let's talk about this week. What's your homework? Start looking at the solicitations of the agencies if you can. So it might be a little bit tricky right now because of the reauthorization piece. So what I would encourage you to do is at the very least look back through these slides, think about which agency is the potential best fit for you. Go to sbir.gov/awards, search keywords, look at which agencies have funded similar technologies in the past, and go to the website of that agency. And if you just type it in, so whichever the agency is, we'll call it NASA. If you go NASA SBIR in Google, you'll very likely get to the website that has all of their SBIR stuff. And generally, they do have old solicitations. And so you can look at the old solicitations, get a feel for what it looks like and how it reads, because they are fairly complex sometimes. But a lot of the information at the top is just background information that you don't necessarily need until you get down and see what the actual requirements are to apply. So go ahead and get a feel for it. If you go to their website and you cannot find a solicitation for them, let me know because I have a backlog of solicitations that I can find you the most recent one that I have and send to you directly so that you can start looking through that. If you're interested in NASA or Department of War, they do have new active solicitations out right now. I would encourage you, if you're interested in any capacity, to go and check those out, just so you can see what those look like this year. So the homework is really just finding the agency that is the best fit for you. Feel free to email it to me or we can talk about it next week. Both of those work. Next week, we'll talk about communication with agency program managers, and we'll also start talking about what it takes to write the proposal. I've mentioned Apex Accelerator before, and so there's the link for that here, but I'll put it up in the follow-up email just because we talked about it as a potential resource to help you get through working on sam.gov if you're looking at those registrations or working on compliance with Department of War. This is a good resource for you. Other than that, that's all I've got for you this week. I'm happy to stay and answer questions if you have them. Otherwise, you're free to go. I'll see you next week.
John, can you please go 2 slides back? One more. Yeah, so this one.
Oh, excuse me.
Answer these questions, and there are like 5 questions that are really time consuming. Do you need us to do all of this before the next week or?
I won't make you answer all those questions, if especially since we don't have all of the agencies out and open yet. If you find what you think is the best fit for you, and next week you tell me which the agency is the best fit and why you think it's the best fit, that'll be good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
John, what if we, find potential fits for multiple ones? Should we just explore them like more in depth?
I would encourage you to explore a little bit.
And
Um,
for the homework, are we maybe providing more than one option or just one?
feel free to come in and talk about multiple. So since we do have such a small group that's going through it this time, I'm more than happy to have those conversations. And so if you want to bring in multiple and we can talk about why it's a good fit and what it would look like to actually apply, I think that that would be a good way to start out next week.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
John,
Oh,
so
and I
off the topic, just curious if you're gonna share the recording from that NSF webinar.
So she did not allow me to record, so I don't have a recording.
Okay.
And she said that it might take about 2 weeks before she can even release the slides. Not exactly sure what's going on behind the scenes with NSF right now, but those were some constraints that she put on us.
Thank you.
I think Amy, did I hear you with another question?
oh, I wanted to give
Oh, Cheetah.
my one-liner just so I
Yes,
stay.
yes, please.
Um, so I've designed a retail solution that physically eliminates theft opportunities while improving customer experience.
I think that's good. So you've got improving customer experience, eliminating theft. I think that I would encourage you to really highlight who it is that you're targeting. I know you said it's a retail device, so it's assumed that it's probably going to retail stores, but in the explanation, really highlight I've created an, potentially something like I've created a device that physically stops theft designed for retail stores
Okay.
and then what's in it for the retail store, right? So helping the customer or to improve customer experience is good. And of course, stores want that. But what do stores really want?
To cut costs.
Cut costs or to increase revenue. So either one
Okay.
works, right? So if you can tell them it's an anti-theft device to cut costs or to reduce expenses from XYZ, I think that that would be a little more impactful for the client.
Okay. Okay.
But very good. I think that's a strong start.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anything else before we close out?
Mhm.
No? Okay.
Thank you, John. See you next week.
See you
Thank
next week.
you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oops.